Okay, so welcome to the next episode of Rails Refactoring podcast. Today, my guest is Marcin, who's with me, the co-author of our Rails meets React ebook. Hi, Marcin.
Hello.
Marcin wrote the better and most interesting parts of the book, and he's my guru. So I've got a couple of questions of him. I hope it's gonna be an interesting conversation for you as well. So let's start, Marcin. So what do you think is the right moment to convert a standard Rails form to a React one based? Like, what's your rule of thumb? When would you convert a form to React one?
I believe it all depends on the requirements of the project. So if we need to have dynamic interface and it's stated before, I would rather go and refactor it even right after creating it, because it's not very hard. The whole point and the whole difficulty to refactor this simple race form into React component is just the problem with passing data from the backend to the frontend. So there are techniques for that, and those techniques are well studied. And you can of course refer some resources if you want to do that. Like in the RCNC organization, we have Scaffold to React repository where it is commit by commit shown how you can do this. But there's no rule of thumb really, because as I said before, it all depends on the project requirements. So if you have a project where there is no a significant part of making an interface dynamic, you can postpone this decision. Thanks to that, thanks to this, that React is allows you to incrementally change and transform your code from backend views into React components. So it's not all or nothing decision. You can just take the smallest part of this form and transform it into React, and it will still work.
So, like, for example, just a couple of fields which require interaction and dynamic part, not the entire form, but just a part of it.
Yes, you can just, for example, transform one input into some kind of autocomplete input if you need some sophisticated features, or like autofill or search input. You can just create one input, and then you don't even need to think about how to pass data to it, because you have the standard form data flow where form is still on the backend side, so you don't need to bother.
Okay, so my rule of thumb is that whenever there is a slightest thing that's required to be dynamic, even a very simple thing like show and hide, for example, when you press a checkbox and then some other options show or hide depending on whether the checkbox is checked or not. If I have even the slightest dynamic requirement like that, I convert the entire form to React-based one. Mostly because, like you said, it's not hard and it's very easy for me then to go with that in React to make things show and hide. And usually because the moment that there is one dynamic aspect of a form, it just starts getting more and more dynamic features to be required for that form. So usually this one dynamic feature that you want to have, and if it's a very simple one, means that in a day or weeks or following months, the requirements are going to get harder and harder. So it's it's better for me to refactor to a React-based form as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I think it's a right approach, especially when you have like a big project and you need to you also need to, for example, not wait for the direct order to implement the dynamic view, but you as a part of the feature want to make this form behave dynamically. And of course, it's not the smallest step you can do, because you can try to consume your HTML view step by step, like start with the most nested element of your HTML3 and just transform it into React, and then rinse and repeat. And after those steps, that smallest steps possible, you should have a valid, fully controlled by React view. So there are many techniques, and what's important here is that you don't need to transform the entire view. It's completely unnecessary, and that's the big strength of React.Js, in my opinion. So you can just, maybe you have an application written in Angular, or you have static HTML views. It doesn't matter, because you can just take the smallest thing possible and transform it into React, and just plug in data from an external world and it will work. So I believe that's the big strength of React, and it's a big strength, and it really shines when you are working on a legacy project or project which is starved from the dynamic features, and you need to work quickly to implement them.
Yeah, and to add something to that, for in some cases, I don't even submit the form via Ajax from JavaScript. I just use the form4 API in Rails to build the form tag that's on the HTML page with proper URL, etc. But only the inside part of the form is rendered with React, and the form can still be submitted normally by the browser, not using Ajax calls from JavaScript. Just normally when user presses the submit button, the browser will submit it. And I think it's a great middle step when you want to have a widget which is some kind of dynamic, but it doesn't need to be fully dynamic, fully it doesn't need to take data via API, it doesn't need to submit data via API. It's like a middle step between a single page application and Railsway.
Yes, and that's maybe weird for someone, because if you think about React.Js, it's more like we are on the level of creating page widgets and so on with React, but we could have like just sprinkles of React, just like we had sprinkles of jQuery before. So in those 4 phases, from fully static views as a phase 1 to phase 4 full spa, and between there are jQuery sprinkles or JavaScript sprinkles as a phase 2, and page widget objects as a phase 3. Even if React is developed and created just to fulfill these stage 3 requirements, you can still use it as a phase 2. So you can just enhance your static views with some React sprinkles. And the model still shines here, because the programming model of React components in terms of defining your user interface is very universal. You can even, it will work good, even in a smallest possible thing. So that's also a big strength of React. And in which environments have you used, Robert, the React.Js? So in which phases you were and you started using React? Do you think it will be better for you if you start from a point like, okay, I have some jQuery, so right now I'll start rewriting to React, or you start with bar static views and you can use React.js from the start from the static views and finish maybe near SPA or on this phase 3.
So in my current project, I usually jump immediately to phase 3 now, which, as you said, are React.js widgets. So it's not a single page application, but on multiple pages, which are initially rendered by Rails, React forms are started, and they are started based on JSON data embedded in the HTML. So before you have API endpoints to communicate between your React application and Rails API, as a transformative middle step, I pass the data via HTML, which is similar to what you can say you have in step number 2. Because with jQuery, we used to base the logic mostly on the DOM state, on what's in the browser, what's rendered, what's not. So we kind of use the HTML to guide the jQuery, how it should start, which DOM entries should be handled by jQuery, which events it needs to subscribe to. But with React, I usually give the data as JSON embedded in HTML, and then the React application knows how to bootstrap itself. So I usually jump immediately to the step 3. I have the React.js widgets, multiple of them, usually 1 or 2 widgets on a single page. And the whole rest, the navigation, the redirection, the process, all that stuff is still handled in a classic Rails way, like a normal page written in Rails.
Yeah, so it is a big maintenance overhead that you have like React and Vue together, because I would like to say that it's also a big strength that you can live with both solutions. Like if you need to, you put more things into React. If you don't need to, you keep all those static views still static, and there is no overhead added. There is no any maintenance cost to keep both solutions. It's very non-intrusive. Like if you start with for example Angular or Ember, those are solutions which favors like full rewrites. So that would be a problem in a situations like that. With React, you can keep it this maintenance cost as little as possible. Do you agree with that, or maybe you had some problems with maintaining both React views and static views?
So I can't comment on the Ember and Angular part, as I haven't used them much, but I can agree that React is pretty flexible, and it's up to you whether you go single page application or embedded widgets or whatever you need, whatever you like. But the nice thing is that it's not like you said, you don't need to rewrite your entire web page. And in fact, some parts of your page can classic Rails views. Some can use the React widgets because they're good enough. and other parts which are the most dynamic and can be written as a completely separate single page applications which only communicate with the backend via JSON API. And you can have these different parts of applications using React from low extent to full extent. It's all up to you, and you can slowly keep rewriting older parts of the app to React. You can keep getting it better at it, whereas you can use the new features to implement is, for example, a single page application with JSON API. So it's completely up to you how much you want to invest into using React, into getting into it. It's not all or nothing.
Yeah, I remember that I had a situation in a project I have worked on, like the starting point of this application, that was an application which was fairly sophisticated, and it started in the user interface as an user interface was built using the data tables. It's a popular solution for Rails. It's purely backend solution to do some fancy sortable tables and so on. And that was our starting point. And this application was under heavy development because it was like abandoned like for 2 years, and then client came back and said, okay, we are starting with new features, but still working with the user interface written with those data tables was extremely hard, and it was hard to make this interface demands possible, because client demanded from us that people who will use this application will be Excel users, so the experience must be similar to the desktop application. So things like refreshing without reloading, real-time updates, and so on. And the thing is that we started to use React in this project, and we've been able to transform those views one by one as a, some kind of Boy Scout rule. So we've implemented a feature and said, okay, so let's transform this view into React. And it was like half an hour or hour and a half, but still in a manageable amount of time, we've been able to transform our data table generated or jQuery generated widget into React. And still we've been able to deliver many features, and it was not like, okay, we're rewriting an app, so 2 weeks without new features. so I think I want to emphasize even more. React.Js, in my opinion, from the standpoint of legacy applications, is the best choice, because it allows you to incrementally refactor your application. After like a year and a half, we had a situation where a piece in this application very rarely used and no features around them for this 1 year and a half. There was still data tables there, but no one bothered, because like 90% of views were written in React, because when feature were implemented, we were transforming it as a part of the commit part of the feature.
Cool. So let's jump to a little different topic. Well, why did you get interested in React?
I believe it was like necessity or like my demand, because as I said, it was in this project like I just described, we've been struggling with managing our UI. It was very fragile, tests were like, capybara tests, which are good, but very brittle and can break easily. And we were looking for a solution to just speed up our development in a front end. And I was working in a very complicated view then, and we had no ideas how to tackle this problem of complicated view layer. And then I just had some days off and went to the student camp. And on this student camp, it was like a presentation made by my good friend about React.Js, and I just watched it and I was like, okay, so this may be what we are looking for in our project. And after I returned to the project, I just installed React using the Race React integration, and I rewritten the view. I was writing like 7 hours or 8 hours without prior experience in like 4 hours and without bugs. So it was very impressive for me. And I have decided to, advocate this approach to the rest of the team. And after some days, they all agreed that it's a good idea to use React.Js, and we stayed with it. And then in Arkansas, we just propagated this knowledge further.
Yeah, so I got started because, like I said, you became an advocate. You started writing about it, blog posts on our Arkansas blog. You started talking about it during our weekly meetings and writing about it on Slack. And I was intrigued, and I did one tutorial, and I was bought. Like, for me, it was like a real magic, like how easy it is to just build the render part based on the state, and whenever the state changes, it does automatically updates. You don't need to do anything hard to make it display different amount, handle more handlers, or it was just easy. And like I have this saying now that React is the first next big thing Rails, because easy things are very easy in React and hard things are still possible. That's my mantra, and I keep it in my mind still after more than 1 year with React, that it's actually easy for easy things, and whenever you have complicated requirements, those things are still possible, because the cycle methods of React are really nice, and you can use them to integrate with existing solutions, existing libraries that already provide features in your application. So I got hooked easily as well.
Yeah, I think what's the best for me in terms of the buying React or something like that was a programming model, like this programming model of having a pure function returning the DOM structure based on properties and state. It's a very elegant abstraction, and in fact, you can, if you now understand React, you can write like very simple implementation in a matter of few days. But this is where it really shines, that it is such an elegant abstraction that React devs optimize it a lot, and it's absolutely transparent to end user. Maybe this key thing is something like a leaking abstraction, but still, it's very well founded abstraction. and it fits in many places, like in React 0.14, there is a split between isomorphic React and DOM React, and React is not about DOM anymore. You have React Native, React Art, React D3, I believe, and so on and so on and so on. So this programming model fits in many places, and it's very inspiring, and even learning this programming model can make you a slightly better programmer, I believe.
Yeah, it's a different approach because instead of thinking like, okay, someone changed something, check the checkbox or change the input, so how should we react to that? Instead of thinking like, what should we update? We are thinking in terms of, okay, so this is what changed our state. How do we re-render, redraw our entire page from scratch? And then we let React figure out what's the end between what we rendered now and what we rendered a second ago when the checkbox was not checked. And it's React job to only apply the changes. We don't need to handle that.
And I believe I have a question for you, because I believe that, like most Rails developers, you've been attracted to Rails not just because it's you perceive it as a good technology, but also because of the community. What do you think about React community? Because I have some strong opinions about it, but I'm curious, how do you see the React community in terms of they're helpful, they are making cool things or bad things, they are inspiring or not? What do you think?
I think they are very helpful and inspiring and friendly. I think right now we are in a moment when the community is trying to provide us with a lot of components that we could use in our applications, instead of writing our own components. I remember that more than 1 year ago, we looked, for example, for a date picker or calendar in React. I wasn't quite satisfied with the number of possible libraries that I could integrate into our project, or with the options that they exposed. They weren't as much configurable as I would like for our project. But 1 year later, now the number of components is growing and growing and growing, and their quality is better. The APIs are getting better. It's easier to integrate them into your code base. So I think I wonder how it's gonna end a year, 2 or 3 from now. jQuery was like that at some point. When after jQuery was discovered, there are hundreds of jQuery plugins that do a lot of things for you, and I'm waiting for having such variety of libraries, components, and to be able to pick from into React application, because the model is a bit different, and you can use the lifecycle methods to integrate, for example, jQuery plugins, which are still very good, and into your React code base, but it requires a bit more work. You need to plug those things into your code base. I'm waiting for things which you can just drop in and they would work.
Yeah, I believe the programming model of React is capable of, consuming the previous solutions like jQuery plugins or something like that. But what is a really selling point for me, or now killing feature where I advocate React, is all about the ideas that are flowing in the community, like in
in Rails. We have many blog posts about that. Railsway is great in terms of creating quick prototypes, and it's very attractive to you if you are creating a simple application, but the model does not scale well when you, for example, want to create a huge application or something like that. And what I love about React community is their ideas, which are well founded in the history of computer science, of good architecture patterns, of functional programming, which I love, and that's very inspiring for me, because you can learn a lot from those people, because they got great foundations, and gurus of this community are people who are founded in a very good practices, very good architectures. Like Flux is very similar to more clean architectures than, for example, the Railsway. That's what I think it's very beneficial for us all. Even if you are not using React, thanks to that React is coming to mainstream, you can expect better libraries in a world of JavaScript, and not only JavaScript, because people got inspired and people want to make software which are better because they learned a lot of cool things from React community, and that's what I love, and that's what I think it's a killer feature of this community.
On the other hand, it's sometimes funny when you read about something and you're like, wait, this is the same idea that was like 10 years ago, like event sourcing. They just got a different naming for the operations or whatever. It does the same idea with different names and moved from backend to front end. And then you are thinking, well, why don't they name the same way that those patterns have already been known as?
Yes, but it's like in every community in IT and computer science, like that there were smart people in 70s or 80s who already invented that, but it was like forgotten. Like, for example, Uncle Bob is telling us about the lost years of architecture, because we are so inspired that, wow, we can now make web, we can now just communicate, and we forgot about all the good architectural patterns. So I believe it is always, we are doomed to this fate. And what's good about React is that they just made a very quick progress to reinvent those solutions, and that's what I find very, very interesting and inspiring. But of course, it's not like they invented something. They maybe, in a current state of events, implementations are maybe better, or implementations are like more suitable to the current world, current requirements, current resources we have, and so on. But still, ideas are the same, and that is the thing that exists in every community, I believe. Like, we are reinventing the wheel in terms of architecture.
But it's not always about who invented what and when. Sometimes it's about who can sell the idea to the masses, who can sell the idea to the developers coming from different languages. And I think React is quite interesting here. The community that is working on React is probably very tied to the JavaScript community, but the community of people who are using React in their product, I think they are coming from multiple languages like Ruby, Python, JavaScript, .NET, Haskell, Clojure. Each of this community is contributing something to JavaScript, and each of this community is taking something from it.
Yeah, you're right. Like that's the case, and the reason why React.Js community is very close to the JavaScript community it's because that React has great foundations in JavaScript. It is not a library which is escaping from JavaScript. Let me take an example again of Angular, where they have like sophisticated language within the framework. Like you have ng repeat and special language for defining your repeat rules, and it is evaluated within the framework. They try to, just escape from the language. React just leverages this language. And they say like, it's a JavaScript and we want to base on JavaScript. We think JavaScript is cool. And that's a change of direction, because many, I call them immigrants, JavaScript immigrants, they want to make things like it's done in Ruby, in Haskell, in C#. They are, programming in JavaScript with their set of practices. And the thing is, JavaScript is a bit different than many languages you are using, for example, on the backend. Its object-oriented approach is a bit different, and way of doing things it's a bit different thanks to the event loop we have, and so on and so on. So the thing is, I believe that ideas are flowing around React, and those are many ideas, often good ideas, just because there is a good foundation in the language itself. It's not like we are trying to escape from JavaScript. We are, consuming JavaScript, and that's great. That's a very good thing for me.
So we are saying that React is embracing JavaScript.
Yes, they are not, escaping from JavaScript, and it's clearly visible. Like for example, when you read the patch notes of the next React releases, and you watch how ECMAScript 2015 is developed, you see that, for example, okay, we are allowing you to use class syntax, and since it's a JavaScript and you want to make it JavaScripty, we won't make things automatically for you because it's a JavaScript. Just write it by yourself. It's not that we don't want to introduce magic. It's, I believe, the main thing that is a point of scoring solutions or paths that the React developers are taking. They say like, okay, we want to use JavaScript as much as possible, and we encourage you to use JavaScript. Don't escape from it. We won't make something that is possible in the language for you. Just do it by yourself. You're writing in JavaScript. I believe that's the case.
Yeah, so you have like choice. You can use, for example, the ECMAScript syntax when you are creating your React components, or you can go with the React create class API, which is more like what you would see in other languages. There is a bit more magic because some methods like the handler methods are auto-binded for you and stuff like that. But you have a choice.
Yes, I think you're right. So
okay, so but which part of React you don't like?
That's a hard question. I believe thing I don't like in React right now is that it is prepackaged with flags usually. So Flux is like the default of managing state now, and I don't think it's a good idea because like now you have like a cargo cult of Flux, so Flux is good for everything. It's not the case. Flux has like many constraints, and you usually don't need it, in fact. So that's a problem. And the second problem is that you have like hidden features of React. They are not documented. It's a choice of developers because they say we will announce these features, but not now. We'll announce it in a first major version. I don't think it's beneficial because they are fully usable for now, and if you know about them, I'm saying about the context in React. If you know about them, they are very cool features, but for some people it would be hard to believe they are already done or they are beneficial because they are not documented yet. That's two main things I dislike about React.
Okay, so the thing that I don't like very much is the SadState API behavior, which is asynchronous, and the way it can be very frustrating and leading to a lot of debugging to people coming to React, which expect that when they call SadState and then read the state, it does not include the state that you have just said. I think it can be very confusing. And for that reason, I try to keep all of my state outside the React and just treat React as something for rendering. But I handle the user interactions and keep the state of my application outside the React classes because I find it easier.
Yeah, there are some applications where state is, like it's another way of telling mutate things, and some more, people are from functional words. They say state is an antipattern, and they are right. It's in my application, I try to keep everything in a property as long as possible. There are complications with state, like it is shallowly compared. That's why immutable data structures work best. There are ways to handle this asynchronicity, and I believe this is evil we must have, like to React do not force you to make decision about your code, the rest of your code. It allows you to be, to fully mutate things. It allows you to use immutable data structures. That's why, thanks to this, it does not force decision on you. It's that's how OM gets created for ClojureScript. If React was like opinionated about how you mutate your state, it would be impossible to port it to ClojureScript, which is a more functional language. It would be much harder. And since there is a freedom of how you use the state, there will be problems about it. And if you like have some preconditions or you have some additional rules in how you mutate your state, you should be good to go. But as I agree, it's a problem. It's a problem. You need to be careful with state manipulation. That's why there are rule of thumbs like keep your components stateless if it's possible, or a distinction of smart and dumb components, and so on. and that's a valid case. I believe you have a right here.
Yeah. So what do you consider the biggest barrier from entering React.Js world or using it in a project? Like, what do you think it's people from going with React?
I've learned some people React.Js. Like right now, I'm educating one team how to use React.Js, and the biggest problem is JavaScript. Because JavaScript is not its syntax is not as friendly as Ruby, for example, and you need to learn how to use it properly. And while it's not a problem for people who are accustomed to front end and development and who already learn JavaScript, React is very simple to learn because it's it's a very low entry barrier. But learning a language is hard. JavaScript is a complicated language. And the second thing about it is lack of some mental mappings between way of doing things on the back end and on the front end, and that's what I very like about our books. We try to create the mapping between the Rails world and React world. For example, in Rails meets React.Js, we are trying to explain things in like it's similar to think about in Rails, but it's often hard to find such good analogies. And this programming model, while simple, demands from you that you understand all terms like state, property, like render method, pure function, lifecycle method, and so on and so on. That would be hard, but it's
So on one side, the React is easy, but on the other hand, it's intimidating sometimes. Like you don't know which parts of React you don't need to know, you don't need to care at the beginning, and you can learn them later.
Yes, I believe that can be a problem, especially, of course. I'm working on front ends quite a time. It's not. I got a different perspective, but I believe that would be a problem for people who are coming from a purely backend world to React, and React is their first choice. Then they need to understand this model, and they need to understand JavaScript. Fortunately, we have a good solution for this JavaScript problem because we have variety of languages transpiled to JavaScript, and Rails people can use CoffeeScript, and C# people can use, or .NET people can use TypeScript, for example. And there is variety of languages which are compiled to JavaScript, transpiled to it, and that's I believe a great solution for this problem. I personally love the vanilla JavaScript or ECMAScript 2015, but this is not a way of doing things for many developers, so they have languages transpiled to JavaScript, and that's absolutely cool for me.
So React is not a framework, but a library. Do you think that this helps its adoption or actually makes it harder because you need more components to have a full stack solution?
Yeah, so you can look at this from two sides. From the side of learning just React, I believe it's a very beneficial thing. It's still a library, and it's very good for React that it's a library. But in terms of infrastructure, it can be confusing. Like you are coming from the Rails world where you have built-in asset pipeline, transpiling things, it's built in, and serving assets, it's still built in, and so on and so on and so on. And in JavaScript world, you have like libraries for that, like Webpack, like Express web server for serving assets, for example. This can be very confusing at the beginning. I believe one of our blog posts called "The Hitchhiker's Guide to Modern JavaScript Tooling" is very successful blog post because it's like it was published on Hacker News and it got great success. People demanded from us this knowledge, like it is hard for people accustomed to frameworks to build an infrastructure to work in React properly. And that is a problem. But in terms of learning how React works, it's a very beneficial that React is a library.
So I think it can be interesting that maybe it's good for its adoption in a legacy code base because it's just a library, and whatever whatever is your environment, whether you are using Rails or .NET or Java, doesn't really matter for React. You can still have your dynamic forms and interactive user interface, so you can easily plug in React to an existing legacy solution and start using it, not to the full extent, but to the amount that matters for you. But in terms of getting new projects started, greenfields, you would like to have a solution which lets you build all the parts which are coupled together, like base and backend rendering, forms, submitting params, and the entire flow of getting things from the database to the front end to the browser, and from the browser back to the database. You would like those things to be glued together, possibly in some kind of convention, but you don't have that with React. You need to use React as some part of a different solution with other libraries that will make it easier for you to connect all the pieces together and have a full stack solution, like at least, for example, React Router, right?
Yes, but on the other hand, while you find this solution for a greenfield project like a framework or as monolithic solution, there is another solution which leverages this variety of tools, and it's called application skeletons or application templates. You just clone a repository, run npm install, run npm run development, and you are good to go. Everything is configured because someone before just configured all those libraries to have sensible defaults, sensible conventions, and packed it and gave it to you. Of course, there's a problem like backend integration, but thanks to that, React is a library. You can take a sophisticated solution, like for example, Sales. It's a framework for Node.js, and to write your application in Sales, but you love React.Js views, so you plug in React views into Sales, and it's easy. So that's also a benefit of React.js.
Okay, so our podcast is called Fearless Refactoring. So what types of refactoring do you consider to be most common in React.js code base? And I imagine that probably it would be extracting new component from part of a bigger one.
Yeah, it would be, of course, extracting a component. It would be creating a higher order component, but it's a rather sophisticated solution. It would be also consolidate state, because the big anti-pattern of React.js is having unneeded state. This is a refactoring of, inlining things or computing it in a method. So extracting method also from this state. Another refactoring I would like to see is like extracting a method from the render, because you don't need to have a component every time you want to extract a small piece of JSX. You can also extract a simple method that it will still work. So there are many refactorings you can do, and I believe those I listed are the most basic ones.
Okay, Marcin, it's been almost an hour. Thank you for a great talk, and see you later. Maybe I have still quite a couple of questions for you that we didn't go through. So I think we have a good chance for a second episode about React.Js.
Okay, I would like also to just summarize, and maybe for our listeners, I would like to say that why React is not a silver bullet, and there is no silver bullets in programming. It's a very inspiring tool. So if you didn't have an occasion to check it out, please do it, because there is a big chance even if you don't like it, you will learn something new, and that might make you a good developer. And you can write a web, you can write mobile, and so on, with the same programming model, which I think it's cool. So be sure to check it out. And
yeah, from my perspective, from the perspective of a mostly backend Rails developer, I can say that I fell in love with React, and I recommend to check it out as well.
Okay, thank you, Robert, for a great talk. I think we've discussed very important questions, and thanks for that. And see you later.
Thanks, Marcin. Bye.